this a home? I mean, do you consider this, is all this stuff in here your stuff?
The books, the paintings, the other stuff like the chair and so on, this is from Take It or Leave It.
Right, right.
So, it's sort of a combination. I mean, most of the surface stuff to make it a home is my stuff.
Are you the only ranger that the Conservation Foundation has?
No, we have a ranger over on Code 2, and that's a much more primitive situation. There's no running water over on Code 2. So all the water has to be hauled in. The shower, it's one of those so-called solar showers, basically a black plastic bag with some holes in it that you get about 2 minutes worth of hot water.
So how did you get this job? I mean, is this this seems like is it a job? I mean, you actually get paid. It's not like you volunteer.
Yeah, I actually get paid for it. I don't get paid a lot for it, but
right.
But it sort of compensates for the housing, the summer housing. The way I fell into it, I moved here. I've been coming here since I was a kid, since I was 16, back in 1960. I first arrived here.
With your family?
No, actually, my best friend in high school and his mother. She was a widow, so they had been here the summer before.
Where were you from?
Oberlin, Ohio.
Okay.
And so my buddy from high school and his mom invited me to come out to Nantucket for the month of August. This was in 1960. And I had never been out to Nantucket, never heard of Nantucket, so I thought, oh, it sounds great. And of course, she brought me along because the two of us could, we had a great time. We spent the month, riding bikes, and, it was just an incredible experience. So during that summer, I met David Rice, who used to own the Sandpiper on Main Street. It's where Maury Real Estate is now, just up from what's now Tompkins. It used to be Murray's Furniture Store. Yeah. And so David Rice hired me for the following summer to come back and work in his restaurant, because I'd grown up in the restaurant business. So I knew pretty much everything, how to cook, how to do things in a restaurant. So I came back that following year, worked in the restaurant, and right next door was Snow's Bicycle Shop. So at the end of the summer, I was working two jobs. I was cooking at the Sandpiper, and I was working over the bike shop. The following summer, came back and was working the two jobs, decided I liked the bike shop more, and stuck with the bike shop. I ended up managing the bike shop. I bought the bike shop, bought the business in 1972. And so all during this time...
Now, it was Snow's Bike?
Snow's Bike Shop.
Now, wasn't that still around up until about 10 years ago or something?
Mm-hmm. I sold the business in 1982 because I didn't own the real estate. The prices were going up, the rents were going up, and I got an offer for the business that was, just at the time seemed too good to refuse. Because the bike business was seasonal. In fact, the season on Nantucket used to be you go from 4th of July to Labor Day,
right.
And that's it. And literally after Labor Day, you could see the tumbleweeds, rolling up Main Street. So it was perfect. So through college and then graduate school, and then after graduate school, I went into teaching. I'm an English major, so taught English. I was English department chairman at Millbrook in Millbrook, New York for 17 years. So during that time, I would spend my summers here on Nantucket, and then go back and teach in New York and back and forth. Later on in that process, I got my pilot's license here on Nantucket. My former father-in-law, Sandy Craig, was a pilot, and so I got a private pilot's license. And while I was teaching in New York, just before I sold the business, because the business would stay open later, I would fly myself on a Friday afternoon after school here to Nantucket, run the business. I had a manager who was operating it during the week for me, be here during the weekend, then fly myself back
Jeez,
to...
it became, okay, so yeah. It actually grew and became quite a nice little business.
It did, yeah. In fact, when I bought the business, I bought the business, there were 100 bicycles. They were all 3 speeds. I was the first one on the island to rent 10 speeds. I was the first one to rent mopeds, and I'm not so sure that's a great thing, but back in, I think it was 77 when they passed the law statewide allowing people to drive these vehicles under, with a car license.
Right.
So it opened up the rental market for them, so I was the first one to rent them. And when I sold the business in 1982, I had over 700 bicycles that I was renting, all different speeds, 5 speeds, 10 speeds, 3 speeds, all that. Plus I had over 60 mopeds.
Who'd you sell it to?
I sold it to a guy named Peter Burns.
Is he still around?
No. Peter Burns he got very involved in the moped business. He had this great vision of opening in resort places in Hawaii. I think he was in Maui. He was in Florida on Sanibel, Captiva. Yeah, exactly. And so he was, having businesses all over. He ultimately went bankrupt. Left me in the lurch for substantial money because I'd financed all that.
See.
Yeah, right. So that was the end of my experience with bicycles. But I spent 22 years here on Nantucket, right on Main Street, and of course it was a much different time than today. But so it's amazing. 22 years on Main Street, and then for the last 15 years there was an interim of about 6 years where I just came as a visitor. But for the last 15 years now, I've been the ranger out here, so it's a totally different experience of Nantucket.
That's amazing. Do you still have your pilot's license?
I do. With a pilot's license, it's good for life, but you have to renew it every 2 years. You have to go for what's called a biennial flight review, and so I'm a non-current pilot now. It's just gotten so expensive and complicated.
Right.
My daughter lives here on Nantucket with her husband, and she has 2 children.
Oh, wonderful.
In fact, I built a second house on my land in Surfside. When I sold the bike shop in 1982, the one thing I did, I bought a piece of land out in Surfside and managed to hang on to it through 2 marriages, 2 kids, through private colleges and all that sort of thing.
Boy.
So when I arrived here back in 1990, it was the end of a second marriage. I had bought an ice cream business, and I was going to become the Ben and Jerry's of the Hudson Valley. This was
here?
No, this was in New York, in Lake Carmel, New York. So I very quickly found out that the ice cream business wasn't what I wanted to do.
So up to this point, you were still seasonal?
I was still seasonal.
Yeah.
Came here in 1990. The end of a second marriage, the end of the ice cream business. Came here, was just going to take a year off, figure out what to do next. So I was a companion for June Carey, Dick Carey's mother. Dick was Actors Theater.
Yeah.
And I had known Dick for years, we went back a long time. So his mother was at the point where she was getting old, sort of pre-Alzheimer's and that sort of thing. She really needed to have somebody during the winter to live. So they had this wonderful apartment in the lower floor of the house on Hinkley Lane. And that's where I really discovered walking, because I had lots of free time. I could walk right down to the beach at Hinkley Lane there.
Yeah.
And I started, and I just kept going, and the more I walked, the more I really got a feel for Nantucket, for the open spaces. That first winter, I circumnavigated the island. I would do it in sections, and of course, I was on foot then. I'd go here and do this section, then ride my bike to the next, where I'd stopped and do the next section, and I kept track of it on a map. And as a result of that experience, I thought, gee, there are all these sand roads here. I really thought I knew Nantucket, because all the summers I'd spent here. So that spring, I needed housing for the summer because they had house guests and all that sort of thing in where I'd been staying for the winter. So I got a call from Jim Lentowski. During that winter, I had checked in with the foundation. I had said, look, I'm out on your properties all the time. Is there anything, anything I can do to help? And so Jim said, well, just sort of report in if you see anything unusual. I had been a member of the foundation since 1973. My former wife and I donated property over on Co2 to the foundation. So that spring, Jim Lentowski called me up and said, we need a ranger. The guy that they had hired had gotten accepted into police school or something like this and couldn't make it for the summer. So I said, sure, I can do it, because, so then I asked him, I said, well, what do I do as ranger? And Jim said, well, your job as ranger is to be a presence for the foundation on our properties. They had originally they were going to burn this place down. They were going to bring the Bruce Watts in and use it as a test, for their equipment and stuff. And it was kind of a statement about building on hilltops. So based on the success of the Co2 Ranger program that had started back in the 70s, Jim said to the board of directors of the foundation, let's keep the house out on the moors as a ranger station. Because they were just beginning to accumulate all these properties out here. And they realized that on these remote properties, people were camping, all sorts of things were going on, and they just wanted to have a presence out here. So I said, okay, I can do that. I can be a presence. And that was before I'd seen this place. I had read about it in one of the newsletters, but the first time I came out here, Bob McGrath drove me out here in the truck.
Oh, Bob.
And we were driving up the driveway, and we came up the hill, and I looked out, and I thought to myself, my God, they're going to pay me to live out here for the summer?
I know.